What we're going to do now is spend the last 10 minutes, and I might throw straight to Heather just to open the Q&A session. Again, for those we can't get around to answering, we will provide that feedback out of session. Heather, can I throw to you?
Yes, you can. So I'm just going to go back up the list, and thank you all for your participation and for the comments and the questions that have been going on here. I'll start with one for Chris from Sam Armstrong about the cost of your water software, please, Chris.
So I guess it probably is dependent on what Avoid a quote you specifically, but for us, I think they have two different payment methods. So for shorter term projects, they'll actually charge you per image. For us, because ours is long term and it's over years, we actually have a monthly subscription per cameras. So for our cameras, I think data transfer and AI classification costs probably about $450 per year all up per site.
Okay, thank you. And another one that's in the list from Trevor Meldrum was, do you also record environmental or cultural site improvements over time as a result of your programs?
Not so much cultural site impacts, but I guess the good thing about Avoider is it's not just specific to pest animals that we're recording, it's any animal that walks in front of our camera trap. So we can actually, I guess, measure, you know, bird activity indices and macropod activity indices in comparison to some of our control programs, and seeing, I guess, not just whether the pest animals are dropping in activity, but whether or not our native fauna is actually responding to that as well. We are also looking at using satellite and DVI data and setting up, I guess, a bit of sampling sites with that in mind on like cropping country or wetlands, and just seeing whether or not we can actually monitor that spatially and seeing whether we can monitor those impacts over time. So
excellent. I look forward to talking to you further about that.
Yeah.
And the next one here is from Matt Hessian. Is there work being done on assessing the application of thermal sensor UAV on monitoring feral pig numbers over wider and more inaccessible areas? And whether that one's for you or a bit for you and a bit for Justin?
We looked at it early on. The challenges that we found with it wasn't that you could pick up feral pigs with thermal cameras. We were looking at them on a platform of a drone, and I guess the problem we found was that our densities of feral pigs was fairly low, that you'd be lucky to pick up a mob of pigs in the battery life of the drone's flight. So there was challenges as far as, I guess, the capacity of the battery life on drones and that sort of thing. We also had issues within area. If you've got a lot of rocks and that sort of thing, you can't do surveys until like nearly 3 o'clock in the morning, because the amount of feedback you get from just the thermal off rocks and that sort of thing sort of interferes with, I guess, the ability to pick up where pig activity or pigs are. So that was our experience. So
thanks, Chris. And one from Naomi Mathers, I think this one's more for Justin. Justin, have you explored the use of very high resolution satellite imagery in the work you're doing?
We have explored that. The very, very high resolution imagery comes at cost. The stuff that you can get quite easily via various different methods comes in at around, like, the best quality that we can get is around about 10-meter resolution, and that's you can see some change, but it's very hard to actually correlate back down to what's happening on the ground. It's okay, and it's also challenging to do that across time. So we've found at the moment the best way to do it is to do these like broad scale surveys. Now currently we're using helicopters, but in the very near future that will be a long range drone, almost guaranteed. And so some of the costs associated with that will change. But yeah, and also the accessibility and use of satellite imagery will also change. So I expect we'll have a solution that will use a bit of both in the near future.
Thank you. Ricky, did you want me to keep going or do you want to wrap up?
Let's go one more. I need to get some more out of Andrew, just because there are a lot in there. Look, one I think a question and maybe look at an opportunity, but given we've finalised our demonstration sites, probably something applicable to all our presenters today is to see wherever possible how we can integrate some of these learnings into methods within the demonstration sites. So the question, and maybe one to Andrew, would be, how scalable are some of your findings, especially on the practicalities of camera trapping, and what your thoughts on expanding or potentially looking at how to integrate different findings across demonstration sites or into further operational stuff next year.
Yeah, thanks, Ricky. The basic camera trap, activity index, the sort of thing that Chris is doing, that can be done at, fairly wide scales. Yeah, it's a bit of a big question, I suppose. Actual density sort of stuff, that's not really scalable. That's pretty boutique sort of operations at the moment. But it's the basic sort of activity index and other sort of things in that family are fairly widely applicable, and they can be integrated with other, control operations, findings from control operations and that sort of thing fairly easily in sort of time series. And they're great for looking at long-term changes in peak activity or distribution over time. So, camera trapping methods in general are really flexible and pretty easy to integrate with all sorts of things. Yeah, bit of a wishy-washy answer, but it's a big topic.
No, that's fine. Look, we've got a record here of all the other questions that have come through. Heather Norell and I will work through with the team to make sure we get those responses back to the relevant people asking questions. Just a reminder, we will also have a recording of this webinar that'll be put on the website in the coming days.